you what you're up to. So what's your primary focus today? And then I'll ask you a little bit about how you came to be doing that. And then maybe hopefully we'll get to where you'd like to go. So it's real simple format, present, past, future. But would you mind maybe just if you were to summarize it at a dinner party, if someone said, what is it you do, what would you say?
Well, I'll start with COVID. Right. I think COVID has been a wake-up call, and it's a wake-up call because really the way we practice medicine is pretty archaic.
Mm-hmm.
We wait for people to get sick,
mm-hmm.
then they'll go to a doctor, then they'll order a test, and then by the time they get medicine, it's days to weeks,
mm-hmm.
and the disease has continued to ravage their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually, it really is speaking to a big gap in the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the technologies that we are using today, people don't realize, but the technologies we are using today to diagnose, for example, from the 50s and on, right? From the 50s to the 80s,
mm-hmm.
to the 90s. This is pretty old technology.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it this way, right? If you were to pick up a phone from the 50s or 60s, what will that be like? And can you imagine using that today?
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing at Roswell is really modernizing the technologies that we are using to test, and we are creating a new type of biosensor, which then has broad application
mm-hmm.
to, especially when you think about next generation testing, or just devices or technologies that need to sense sort of the activity of a biomolecule or the presence of a biomolecule. So in a nutshell, what we're doing is we are bringing to market a new class of technology called molecular electronics. And these are based on us integrating molecules into nanocircuits and then deploying those on microchips to scale. So what you're going to see as a result of this is give us the ability to test every day at home. And you're not just going to test for COVID, but you'll have a little chip that costs you about $10 a day, and it's going to test you for all known viruses. And you can run it weekly, you can run it daily in the high season, and you don't have to wait to get sick to actually get the test done. So that's the sort of disruption that we are unlocking in terms of just much more powerful assays, really highly multiplexed, but then they are also going to be faster and cheaper. That's the goal. Yeah.
So how is that coming along? Where were you at in that? Yeah.
It's pretty crazy because we sort of were developing another sort of killer application, which is whole genome sequencing. But then when COVID hit about 9 months ago, we pivoted, and then we started to deploy this technology specifically to address multivirus testing, including COVID, and targeting that for at-home sort of deployment. And we've made a lot of progress. The assay is developed, the chip is developed, and now we're at a point where come Q1, we want to pivot and then move now into product development with a goal to get product out by the next flu season.
Okay, 21.
21, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is that kind of like a 510K thing that you need to get done, or you're looking for at-home use? That's not a diagnostic in the same way.
That's an interesting question, because it seems so. One is that we are calling it a health screen.
Yeah.
And what means is that, the way the FDA is looking at these things is that if you do get positive, then you need to go in and get tested still.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a bit of a gray area, but we do assume that we'll definitely look to apply for EUA potentially in Q1 timeframe and write that. But then eventually this device is targeted to get a 510K at some point in time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, thank you for that summary. I appreciate it. I really do. And now, the way that I came to you was through this article that Jonathan Rowland wrote about this dearth of Black folks in biotech in San Diego in particular, which was notable. We, as the third largest biotech hub in the country, just looking at that, given the environment that we're in, how do you translate all that? I mean, you were kind of the centerpiece of the article. I see you're very active kind of on LinkedIn, on the social platforms. How do you respond to that, or how does that play out in your life?
Well, I saw it more of a responsibility, and I see that this is a time where we need to step up and speak up, and highlight, the injustices, and narrowly but also broadly across the board. And so I saw it as a unique opportunity, and I appreciated the platform to tell this story. But I really saw that then as really the beginning of something that I personally could participate in this community, to help at least highlight the plight of African Americans, but more so actually to be part of the solution in trying to actually create a workplace that actually embodies sort of the better principles of what a diverse community or diverse workplace needs to look like and needs to be, where everyone is empowered, the team is integrated, and everyone is really performing at their maximum potential. And so so I think it was I felt that if we do not step up and speak up and really act, that the excitement will die away, and we'll have missed a golden opportunity. So I see this as really urgent, and I just try to do my little part, and I know that if we all do our parts, that together we can actually have a big difference.
Yes. You're singing out of my songbook. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you having this conversation. So how has that played out? It's so much at the center of our understanding culturally right now because of George Floyd and all the things that have happened. But over your career, and as you stepped into kind of CEO level leadership within science, has the racial piece been existent? Has it even been part of your consciousness, or how has that been? How has that played out in your life as you've developed as a scientist and then as a leader?
Well, I think like many professionals, Black professionals who face, you're mostly swimming against the tide in trying to get your social mobility and upward mobility and professional mobility. You generally are swimming against the tide. And it's not a situation where the opportunities are handed to you, or it's even expected, right? You almost have to you're working double, triple the effort. You're putting in so much more to get the same recognition as your peers, and that's been very typical. I think for me, a big part of my journey, and I think the one that was really transformational, is when I had really been responsible for creating a business unit, and I had the unfortunate situation where they allowed me to do it because it was my idea, but they wanted me to be profitable in year one, and without any investment really from the mothership, right? So I had to go get customers, drive the execution, and we were profitable in year one. But once that business started to take off, then I was actually replaced. I learned through a PowerPoint that they had assigned somebody else on top of a business unit that I had just created, because suddenly it was growing and it was beautiful.
Wow.
But then I knew that you really, you need to be in an environment where your ability is recognized, yes, but then where you have a leadership that has the courage to give you then the opportunity and the rewards commensurate to that performance. And that's the hard part, right? And I do not yet know such organizations. I've not experienced them. And that's when I left, and fortunate to me that now Roswell has taken off, and that I've been able to now be in a position to provide that to others.
That's fantastic. Yes. So how can you tell me a little bit? I was kind of saying to you, I think in our prior conversation, you know, um, I said, I assume you're black. Like I was looking at you at all of your credentials, and I saw India, and I saw these different places, and I was like, you know, I said, I think I'm taking a gamble. I don't really know. So can you tell me, from where you hail? Can you give me a little bit of your backstory,
Sure.
the origin story, if you will?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I know. Well, I was born in Kenya. That's sort of my place of birth. I just was someone who very early on had this real desire to experience other cultures and just other people's way of life, and even from early on. Through my mother, she was a biology teacher. I developed just love for biology, and then through life, I took a bit of a detour. I joined the Kenya Air Force, and then I did that, but then decided I really wanted to go back and study in the area of biotech. I knew that from early on. So through a friend whose dad had been posted to India in the education attaché, he was going. And I said, okay, let's go. And so we went over, and 5 years later, I left with my postgraduate degree. And following that is when I came to the U.S. Through a project I was doing at Case Western Reserve University.
Got
So
it.
that's the.
Got it. That's quite the path, man.
Yeah.
So then, how has it been? I have this conversation kind of frequently about folks, kind of ex-US, that come into the racial milieu of the United States, and have this kind of in-between experience, particularly African descendant folks, right? So Black folks outside of the United States come to the United States, and then they have a kind of different orienting or an attempt to orient, within that context. How has that been for you, I suppose? So when you encounter other Black folks, whether in just the space or in biotech, how do you navigate that? Or have you had to? Is it even a thought, is it a consideration?
Well, one of the talks I give here, at least to the team here, is one of the slides I show them not a spaceship, but a ship.
Yeah.
We talk spaceships a lot at Roswell. It was a slave ship.
Yes.
And it was a cross section, and it showed how the slaves were stacked together.
Yes. Yep.
And this photo or this image was captured at Fort Jesus, which is a town on the east coast of Africa, of Kenya, and that's where one of the places slaves were shipped to the U.S. And I said, this is how some of my people came to this country. It was not voluntary; it was forced, and they were really deprived of their rights. I came here voluntarily, but I experienced some of the same things they experienced, albeit not at that scale. But it's almost like the fight they fought at that time is we're continuing it here, and it's almost you feel an obligation and a duty to bring that to closure, where we can close that gap of the inequalities, but also just more from the humanity perspective, where the Black man is seen as a lesser human being.
Yeah.
Right. So my interaction with sort of fellow Black Americans who were born here, it's almost, there's that, it's almost you connect at the soul, right? You see that guy in the street, and that nod, right?
Yeah.
It all. And he could be right across the room, but the moment you guys connect, there's a connection there, right? You don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
And so it's been that way for me, and I sense that I think the what we've gone through as a community has left that thread that connects us very deeply.
Yeah.
And there continues to be, at least then, an obligation that what can we do
Sure.
pull us up all as a
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
and provide for us the same opportunities,
Yeah.
versus really work against each other.
Yeah. 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 I appreciate that. Yeah. That the black man nod, you know.
Right?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And
Yeah.
so the other angle here that I'm also exploring is location. So, you know, there's this kind of racial lens, but then, you know, I'm a fan of proximity. There's this guy, Brian Stevenson, you know, the Just Mercy guy. I don't know, you may be familiar with the guy that does all that activism in prisons to right a lot of those injustices. And then he's also started this equal justice initiative down, I want to say it's in Alabama, actually. It's like a lynching memorial or something. It's really heavy, but anyway, he goes around giving talks and he's really impactful, as you know. But one of his tenets, as he talks about healing, is this idea of proximity. And so that's really kind of what's undergirding a lot of these conversations, is that for me, someone who's been in San Diego since 2002 and who intends to be here, and, you know, God willing, you know, to however long it takes me, right?
Right.
I plan to stay here. My kids were born here and my family is here now.
Yeah.
And so being able to identify kind of luminaries or folks of influence in the town and create some connectivity and think about where the gaps are and get into kind of solution mindedness and do our little part is what is going on here for me.
Right.
So I'm curious for you, how long you've been in San Diego, and then what areas have been inspiring to you, or have, you know, kind of where are your watering holes? What do you see that's kind of interesting, and what community looks like for you here locally? As I say all of that, what comes up for you?
Yeah, I think I moved here around 2003.
Yeah.
So, you know, worked various sort of career roles and progressed that way. And part of it was I actually was in the commercial team, and so did a lot of just visiting with customers at the universities, etc.
Yeah.
And it's a very limited Black community that you will interact with.
Yeah.
Right, just across the board. And so clearly the gap there is that we don't have enough of us really pursuing these career tracks that then put us in these places. A big part of that could just be really not the right mentorship to guide students there, not giving them the same opportunities to do internships and that sort of thing. And so that's where I've been putting a lot of my energy in terms of, okay, how can I participate in that? And reaching out to various schools and bringing along the full company and saying, what can we do in the community? And we did a brainstorm, and we all agreed that, okay, how we want to participate is intervene earlier in their lives, you know, in high school, especially, and early college, and give them opportunities through mentoring. People have stepped up. So we look to actually set up, the company will set up and make it easy for them, where they need to just show up on a call, calendar, you're mentoring this kid over the next month or whatever, or you're providing tuition, or we are going to have internships once we figure out the COVID thing. So that's where I've spent at least my thoughts as far as my contribution is. And I've failed to really connect more at the sort of, if there's other sort of Black.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
You know.
Like associations.
Exactly. I've not found any, and I don't think I have the capacity to actually set that up just by virtue of how busy things are here at Roswell.
No, I understand. I know that was part of my own reflection, having been here since 2002, largely in North County and in the biotech area, in majority spaces, you know, having oftentimes the diversity and inclusion conversation, but usually talking to like boardrooms of all white folks, you know, or non-Black folks. And I was like, well, what actually is happening in San Diego? So, I'm figuring that out myself as I go along.
Right.
I will say, though, towards that thing you described, your own internal initiative at Roswell, there's two things that come to mind. One, and I don't know if we talked about this or not, there's a gentleman named Bill Rastetter who used to be the chairman of Illumina. You may be familiar with him. He's quite well known in San Diego, but he's created an organization called SD Squared, which just kind of got started in October. Gentry Patrick, I think we've talked about that gentleman, the neuroscientist at UCSD, is an advisor. A guy named H. Puentes is kind of leading it, I think, as a face of it. But they're really trying to muster corporate support to increase these kinds of early interventions that you're describing.
Yeah.
Reality Changers is the nonprofit I think that they work with. They do a really good job of taking kind of K through 12 level kids from kind of subpar educational achievement and projecting them into Stanford and MIT and Berkeley and really mobilizing them. So Gentry has worked with them. So if you can imagine, we've got our K through 12 pool where we're trying to create and spark the imaginations of these kind of baby scientists, and then the kind of undergrad and graduate level environment. So, with Gentry at UCSD, he's doing a lot to think through that. And then the place where we maybe could do a little more is what you've just described, catching and drawing people into these firms locally.
Right.
Because that's one area for me that I have felt like it's a little bit of a miss. Like we can build these minds and then we send them out of the community. Again, to the proximity thing, it might be nice if we here as biotech leaders in this community could catch them, and be places where they can stay even, and impact the communities and make it more of a cyclical thing.
Right.
So that's one. And then there's another company, Life Science Cares, who Rob Perez, he used to be the CEO of, it's not Qubit, I think Qubit. They were sold to Merck. Anyway, he's out of Boston. Rob Perez is his name. He used to be on our board actually at Sidera, and then he now has this philanthropic effort, which they function in many ways as the engagement arm for biotech companies. So in Boston, they have one in Philly, the Bay Area, and then San Diego. They almost can white label your corporate, like, social responsibility effort. And they give you kind of a smorgasbord, a deli of ways you can interact with the neighborhood, whether it's in poverty or in education or food banks or wherever, elder care. They're just getting started here, but they really are hoping to mobilize the life science community to social action. And I'm really impressed with them. So my CEO is on their kind of board of managers or advisors, so we're really involved with them.
Wow.
But I'll say, I used to be on the board for the local Leukemia Lymphoma Society, board of trustees, for a number of years when I was at BD.
Yeah. And
I used to lament that the largest contributors were like SDG&E, Geico. You couldn't get like the J&Js and the Novartises and the people have come out that were really that you would imagine would come out.
Wow.
So I don't know if I know I'm talking long about this, but I've thought about it for a while. I don't know if it's kind of a phenotypical scientist thing, like extrovert, introvert thing sometimes. True, That's probably too broad and too brush. That might be too, general a characterization, but I would love to see this community, again, third largest biotech hub in the country, really activate around this social responsibility. Anyhow, so then another thing here, maybe I'll bring up to you. I was talking to the only CMO that I've been able to find, Black CMO, Dr. Stanley Lewis. He's come out of a world of kind of infectious disease and specifically HIV. He brought to market, I think, the only host-directed therapeutic for HIV, and it was approved like in 2018. But he has this thought about creating an office, like in the same way that we have an orphan drug office for drugs that target disease states that affect small populations. he would create an office of health disparities. So
This is the email you sent me.
did I forward it to you? I think I did. Yes, I
Yeah,
hope I did.
yeah. No, I've been trying to reply, but I've not gotten to.
That's okay.
It's like I keep getting
Yes.
interesting. No, that's interesting.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
It's
that
kind
is
of,
really interesting.
yeah. It's quite the he was wanting to socialize the idea and to see what people think. It would, I don't have a lot of experience in lobbying the government or setting up, federal agencies and something, but as an idea, I like it.
Yeah, so at LifeTech, one of the ideas we had there, and a lot of reason these guys put the drugs on the shelves, is because they do have adverse effects,
Yeah.
but in a very small, just a little bit of adverse effects they put on shelf.
Yeah.
So the idea was, well, if you could go in and genotype the populations and figure out, okay, which ones have the adverse effects, then you could put back the drug in the market, right?
Yeah.
But the issue is that pharma are not as interested as that, because then the population is much smaller, right?
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I think the opportunity is there. And in that case, it may involve some sort of genotyping then the different populations and figuring out why is it, not even figuring out why, as long as you have a biomarker that can tell you this group is good, this ones are not, then you can know how to administer it. So from a funding perspective, I think other than the office itself, I think it's going to be a question of, okay, how do you fund an initiative for genotyping? A big issue right now is Illumina is mostly the way you will do it. You could do it through arrays, but probably you just want to do like genome sequencing, and then it's a cost thing, right? It's okay. It's about $2,000 a patient, and if you're doing a study of 50, the numbers start to go up.
Yeah.
However, right, with advancements in these technologies like Roswell, then the cost is going to start to approach $100. So the timing is right. Because then you'll be able to actually genotype them and then be actually able to implement these approaches and as an entity. And I don't know how this will work. You could buy the rights to these drugs and then take them to market, or obviously you could provide pharma with then the incentives to be able then to get these back to market. But I totally agree. It's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, yeah, it made me think. And that would be lovely, again, creating communities, particularly in biotech leadership, that can think about some of these gaps and how to promote them in innovative ways. That's kind of an example. But as you're talking and responding to that, it strikes me, San Diego, back to this community idea, the genetic kind of Illumina, the house that Illumina built, that presence here in town of folks that are engaged in kind of, I don't know, digital health is probably the wrong way to say it, but just gene-based, genome-based solutions. Have you found, is that a rich environment? I'm curious for you as someone kind of in that space, what you think about that community and your competition and whatnot. Like, is that a rich conversation? Do you have colleagues in town and other organizations where you can think about some of the problems that you're trying to solve with the tools that you have? Does it feel that way?
No, not specific to the Black community, for example.
Yeah.
It's just very general, and but there's really not been, for me at least, at all, this social element.
Yes.
Right. This is which is what you're alluding to, is lacking, and it's just not there.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And so I think unless we drive it,
I
don't know how it's going to happen.
Right? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So we almost have to stand at the mountaintop and shout the loudest and get people's attention.
Yeah.
But then also having these exemplar projects that can get highlighted, and then we could draw them in. Maybe they just don't know how to do it.
Yeah. That's one of the illustrations that Rossiter uses in terms of engaging students is, I think, something that did come up at Illumina, where they do whole genome sequencing of fish. So they'll send them all out to the market. They'll all take a fish sample. They'll take the name of the fish and a sample of the fish, and they'll bring it in, they'll sequence it, and then compare based on the sequence and the identification of the species, and what was given to them. So I think there was one example where someone got, scammed because they thought they were buying Chile, sea bass, and it was some other grouper or something, it was some other less.
Yeah.
So that was an example of inspiring people through genetics and genomics. And so, yeah, that's just, I guess, an example. But in my mind somewhere, when I think of San Diego as such a genomic hotbed, regardless of the race even part, I just wondered for someone like you working in that space, if it felt as rich as it appears on the outside. Do you feel like there's community in places where you have people challenging your ideas and kind of helping move the technology forward? Because they talk about, just like you mentioned there, with driving the price down, the kind of almost a Moore's law type, phenomenon within sequencing, where you're getting more and more information for less and less cost. It feels really like the gold mine or something, like that era when people are mining for gold, like really frothy. Does it feel frothy like that, or do you feel kind of local and in your own lane? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, what will surprise you is that froth is actually happening at the smaller startups.
Yeah.
The bigger companies, LifeTech,
Yeah.
Illumina,
Yeah.
they sort of have charted their course, and they're, let me put it this way, they're really good at doing incremental sort of development, incremental improvement.
Yeah.
But the breakthroughs are coming from the smaller communities, right? There's a couple companies that are pretty recent here, Omnium, for example, Element Biosciences, Roswell, right? This is where the true innovation is happening. They're the ones taking the big bets and big risks.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Illuminas of the world will buy them at one day. But it's interesting to me, and that's one of the reasons I left like LifeTech, because the innovation is not happening there, right? And there's a lot of pushback to take the big technical risks, and it's almost like, let's, this is what we know. We know it's a very clear, do X, Y, and Z, and you improve it, and that's the path, right? But in terms of just the next breakthroughs are probably going to come from San Diego or the Bay Area.
Yeah,
that's where a lot of this is happening.
Yeah. Do you feel, and forgive me, and I'm watching time too, because I know you have for 10 minutes over, so let me know when you got to go, okay? Because I could talk to you all day. But maybe I'll talk tech for just a second, then we can, think about what you imagine in terms of the future. But technology-wise and staying kind of on the bleeding edge, are you pre-commercial? So I'm sorry, I should have looked this up before I got on the phone with you.
Yeah, we're pre-commercial, right? So we are looking to get into market end of next year.
End of 22. So
21.
So and you're not public though. What is this? Give me a little bit of history on Roswell. Actually, how you came to be there. I feel like they're an older organization than the technology that you're now pursuing. Like they've been around for a while.
So we've been around, really formed in 2014, but operational in 2015.
Okay.
So we've been building this thing for, this is going to be going 6 years now.
Okay.
And like I said, a big part of it is we needed to pretty much solve some pretty difficult problems, which is one is doing nanofabrication at the dimension of molecules is very difficult.
Yes.
Two is getting sort of, if you can measure at these, think of it as trying to measure you need a very sensitive measuring meter that can measure in sort of the peak one range, right? Which is very small. So we've solved that, and now we're putting all that together into a commercial application, and we're able to then launch in end of 2021.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. And you came on board when?
I came on board at the founding.
Oh, you were okay.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So and so this is all kind of venture backed at this moment, or where?
All venture backed. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So did you have to take the technology, the idea, this vision for what could be, and go and do the pitches and the whole thing? This is.
Yeah, I founded the company and then grown it. We're about 50 people now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So hopefully, looking to see how we can scale from here. But
Yes. And who were your primary investors? Did you like the local community, or where did you have to go? That whole.
that is a good question, and we can have this conversation in detail another day. But the VCs wouldn't give me money. I had to go abroad.
Wow. Wow.
Right. This is a black guy trying to start a biotech. Like, what are you smoking? It's like, go back to the back room.
Yeah.
So no, it was quite a challenge, but I stuck with it. Went without a salary for over a year, and I believed in it. I eventually I actually got my seed money from the Middle East.
Wow.
Through projects I had done there. They believed in me, and they funded it, and it's taken off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So then, do you feel any challenge for nanofabrication and creating these sensors? So do you feel like you've cracked those two?
Yeah. So sometimes in technology development, you do things and then you wait for the miracle to happen, right?
Yeah.
I think we're past the miracle now. So
Okay.
mostly now on the engineering and get it to market.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. My goodness. Well, my friend.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired to know that you're out there, and it's a beautiful thing, really. And I'm glad. Not every time, when folks like yourself are identified, do they always want that role? People don't always think, So it's whenever I see you're posting out loud online and kind of being active and engaged, it really is inspirational. It truly is inspirational. So I thank you for your perseverance and your own vision and sense of initiative. I think it's a beautiful thing. So really, truly, thank you.
Yeah.
And I guess to be continued. I maybe as a parting comment, maybe I would ask you this: what to you, when you look back on your story and kind of what you're up to, when you talk to young people, do you feel like is the most significant thing in terms of where they put their mind or their energy? What is there something that stands out like that for you, like when you give guidance or suggestions or mentoring?
I definitely, right, and this is what I tell my son is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
And you have to not be scared to take the shots. Yeah. You need to have courage and you need to have resilience, right? That's my mantra. And I think many of us we shy away from because it's too bold, it's too big, and I could never do that. So that will be it.
That's fantastic. We're going to end on that note. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you too, and I appreciate the friendship. So